Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be going over some Miliastra Sandbox, Miliastra Wonderland development stuff. If you want to get into developing your own Miliastra Wonderland world, this is the perfect place for you, because those tutorials were not very good, I'm gonna be so real. I had such a hard time understanding them, I ended up just figuring it out on my own, so let's just get right into it. And this will be a series, so I will be posting these like every so often, hopefully, if I remember to. So hopefully you guys enjoy. We're first going to go over terminology and like what things are and what we should be looking at, and then we're going to make our own little small game. And in the next video I'll go into something more in depth, but for now let's look into terminology. Up here we have 4 different sections. The first one is the terrain editor, where we can add these blocks of terrain, right? And we can also delete them. And if we use, like, if we get rid of and if we want to just replace these blocks, I can use the level out tool, which will then level out what's there already. Like, I believe, I've never used really the level out tool a whole lot, but I believe if I do this too, it'll just change what's there to, oh no, it literally just levels it out as to whatever block you want it to be. To the main level of, I believe, what the Wonderland is at. But that's really quite small right now. We can also add stairs. I think it changes the block too. We can add water. It's really, really handy. But that is just a simple little thing you should note down, that there is the terrain editor. It's quite useful, but we will not be using it a whole lot in this. The next thing we want to make note of is the placement feature, entity placement, which is the second tab up here. And this is where you will add like your units, such as like trees. Say you want to add trees, you'll go to static units and then go to trees, and you can add a bunch of different types of trees, and that's pretty cool. You can also add vegetation, landforms, rocks, buildings, building structures, artificial decoration, light, which is like lighting things, which they don't light on their own. I think you have to, there's a way to get them to light on, there's a way to give them lighting. You also have food, weapons, and tools. In the creations tab, it's mainly just living things. I'm gonna be so real, I haven't looked through a lot of these yet, because my main focus on this has been the node graphs, which we'll get into a little later. And then of course we have loot, which is the challenge coins, which you can pick up. That's the preset loot you've got. You can add your own loot, which I will explain how to do later. Now if we move over to the next tab up here, we have the prefab box, which consists of everything you've made. There's probably better ways to explain what prefabs are, but essentially, you can go into dynamic. I'm just going to do a quick demonstration. Say I want this elemental torch to be a prefab. I'm going to reuse this again and again. I want to use multiple elemental torches. You come into here, you add a prefab, you save that prefab, and then you name it elemental torch. What's useful about this is, I can come into here, these tabs over here, next to elemental torch, and I can add effects, I can add custom variables, and I can add all sorts of things that are really useful to these items, that are really important that you can't do over in the entity placement stage. So if I come into here and add certain things, right? Like if I add this flower box and then I try to go over to the node grabs or anything like that, it doesn't let me. But, although I'm gonna be real, I just found out, if I'm being entirely honest, I just found out certain items do. So if I go to dynamic units, it lets you, I believe. I didn't know that. I'm gonna be so real. So, the difference between prefabs and normal things, though, is I could take a static unit, I could put it in here, and then I can still edit these things. Like, dynamic units, you can edit them however, but with static units, you can only edit them as prefabs, and then save them. Essentially, these are just if you want to reuse this. If I want to take this bush, right? Let's take this bush, for example. I want to take this bush, and when I click on this bush, on anywhere in the map, it will pop up a menu saying, here's what you have to do, here's like the goal of the game, so it reminds the player of the goal of the game. You can do that in prefabs, and then you just save this prefab as guide, maybe that's your guide prefab, and then I can come into here, I can go into uncategorize, because I didn't give it a category, and I can place this guide anywhere, and it's going to be the same object with all the same. I can place it anywhere on the map, and it will be the same object with the same node grabs and like properties to it. And that's what makes prefab so powerful. The last tab we will be covering is, of course, the combat preset, which is not just for combat, it has a lot of really important things in here. It's not just if you're using, like, have a combat-related map. So make sure you have a look through this. For this, you can have different templates for different characters. So say I want to... Let's start by taking a look over at the templates, which are on the left-hand side of your screen. We're going to start by making a template called Gardener. And we're also going to make a template for, let's say, Woodcutter. So maybe you have a woodcutting class and a gardening class in there. So people can choose which one they want to do, and then they can only do that class. For this, you can choose selecting players. You can select all the players. Maybe they all start out as gardener, and none of them start out as woodcutter. Or maybe you could select only player 2 starts out as a woodcutter, and player 1 starts out as a gardener. Depending on how many players you have in the game, you can have up to 8 at the moment. Basic stuff is just like what level the character is, so maybe level 90 is my character's level. The highest level you can give your characters is 200, but we're just going to stick to 1 because this is not important for our game that we're making right now. You can add a spawn point, which can be changed in the preset points, which I'll go into in another video. You can add initial classes. I'm gonna be so real, I haven't gotten a whole lot into the classes. I don't know what that means. Oh, here we go. The classes are mainly just gameplay mechanics, like what they're allowed to do basically. And just as a base, like whether they can normal attack, whether they can sprint, glide, whatever, what level they are. I don't know why that's in both areas. I'm not entirely sure. I'm a little new to this myself, I'm gonna be so real. They have the base HP, base attack, base defense, attribute growth, which I believe is just shows how this gets higher as you level up. I haven't touched much on the combat abilities and stuff, so you'll have to bear with me on that. You have the normal attack stuff, you have node grabs, of course, but we're going to mainly focus on the player templates. You can also go... After you've decided if you want to use an initial class or not, you can allow them to revive. The rest of this is kind of self-explanatory, to be honest, but what's really important is over here, custom variables. These are super important. Variables are basically just stored data. Say, most of the time you'll use this variable, you'll need an integer and you'll add a new variable. Say you have a score, right? And whatever it be, whether it be how many things you've collected of one thing, how many points you've gotten, how many coins you've collected, how many times you've jumped. This will go into, it doesn't have to be named score, it can be named whatever you want, whatever you'll remember it as, and that is your integer variable. Maybe your score starts at 0, and you can add a node graph that will up this by 1 each time you do something. That's what variables are for. They're just stored data. So once I join in the game, say I have set this to 1, this will be on my character, like in the background, set to my player. My variable of my score will be 1. Say there's a node graph on that coin, and that says +1 to your score. Then my score will turn into 2, and that can update other things inside the game. So we're going to leave the score at 0 for now, just because that's going to come in handy later. And lastly, we have node graphs. These are so important for later on when we are going to go more into node graphs. This is your visual programming of Miliastra Sandbox, and it is going to be where you get all the functions together and make things happen. You can only do so much without node graphs. You really can't do much at all, actually. But node graphs are so important. I'll teach you more about those later in this video. Now, we're going to move on to editing character. The character is a little bit different. I'm gonna be real, I don't know the entirety of the difference between the player and the character. You have a lot more, like, stuff you can add. Like, you can give yourself an inventory, you can give the character an inventory. And this will give you an inventory in-game. So when you click, like, B, it'll open up your inventory. Or whatever button you have to click to open your inventory, it will open up your inventory in the game. You also have things like a text bubble, an equipment slot, which is the same as your utilities in Genshin, where you have like your treasure compass and stuff. You can edit those, which is something similar, but you can make them do their own custom functions. Sound effects, visual effects, statuses, variables, which these are all very important. So make sure to take a look at these. We'll come back to this more later. These are just important things to make note of. And then of course we have the node graphs again. Honestly, don't entirely know the difference between these two. If I'm being entirely honest, I apologize for that. I know I should probably learn a little more before making a tutorial, but I felt like making a video, so here we are. We are going to move into the node graphs now. We're going to add a node graph, open Miliastra Sandbox. Now, I have this over here, but I have to make it a little bit smaller because it is too big right now. Let me just resize this giant big ol' box to be the right size for what we are doing. You can create tabs for your nodes, so maybe I have a folder for my teleport nodes. So when someone uses a teleport or a door or something that needs to teleport them somewhere else, it would go into this node. And then I can create a node graph, which I can rename or I can do whatever. But we're going to ignore that for now. For this, you want to right-click on the screen, and this menu is going to come up with all these different types of nodes. For now, all you need to know is event nodes are, so say something happens in game, you have an event node that basically says when this happens, you'll use an execution node. And that's how that works. So event node always comes before execution node, I believe. I'm not a professional in nodes. I've done a little bit of coding. I've never done nodes before, but prior to Miliastra Wonderland. Query nodes are just when you want to figure out something like, say a variable, they want to proc the variable and see how much is in that variable. You'll have get custom variable, and that will be the node for telling you what the variable is. So, for example, let's do a quick little thing. Say I want to have my player teleported every time they interact with a tree. Let's use a tree for an example, or a sign. We'll use a sign. So when the character, let's look up tab, because that's where it's going to be. It's going to be under when tab is selected, right? When you have a prefab, right? So let's take our prefab, let's get our sign actually, because we wanted to use a sign. Let's get our wooden signpost, let's move it over here. And say I want to add a tab to this. I forgot to go into this briefly, because I did want to do that. We have tabs, and once we add a tab, we can do this, and this right here is a tab. You can edit the text, which can only be viewed once you're at craftsperson level 3, so I'd recommend leveling up your craftsperson level. But you can write, click here to click here, or you could write teleport, or you could write anything really. You could write go to the next area, just if it fits. There is a very small limit to how much you can write here, but I'm going to write teleport. So now I can also edit this to be like a sphere or a cube or whatever I want it to be. I typically like to make it a sphere because it's a lot easier to make it bigger. And then I can have it, and to make it bigger, you're going to want to edit the radius. I typically like it to I typically like the radius to be either like 1 or 2, depending on how big just so the player can actually reach it. So now we have our prefab we've been using for this. When tab is selected, what tab? It might be like very confused, wondering what tab. But the thing is, when we say when tab is selected, what tab are we talking about? So we're going to go back to Genshin, and we are going to go into the prefabs that we just made, and we're going to actually save it really quickly. We're going to name it teleport sign. And that is going to be our first prefab that we're actually going to be working with and doing stuff with, because we really haven't done much yet. And we're going to go into the node graphs. That is over here. We have the node graphs. And we're going to add node graph, add that graph we just made. And that is going to basically link the node graph we just made and this prefab that we were working with right now. And we're going to save that once more. Next, we are going to go back to what we were doing before, and we are going to edit this node graph. So when tab is selected, this is already connected to that prefab we were working on. So when the tab of the prefab that we were working on is selected, since it is connected to this node graph, it's going to note that this is that tab. So when tab is selected, we can teleport the player, which is what we want to do. So we're going to connect these two together. But you might just be thinking you're going to use select your entity, aka the person who selected, the entity that selected the tab would go right to here. But I find that that doesn't always work, so we gotta get a query. Let me find it. It's a little difficult to find sometimes. I normally just search up player. I'll get the exact word for it because I always forget what it's called. Where'd it go? Get player entity to which character belongs. It's a very long tab. So we're going to connect this to this. Let's delete that old tab. Disconnect link. It doesn't really matter where these go as long as they're connected to the right thing. Character entity, and then affiliated player entity. So that's what that does. Target location, where do we want it to teleport us to? We can go back to Genshin, and we can quickly make a preset point, which we're going to do really quickly. We can go over to this tab right up here, these 9 squares, and we are going to go to preset point management, and we're going to add a new preset, create new preset. And that is the same thing as we have over here. We have this preset point over here, and then we just made a new one. This is our spawn over here. But we're going to create a new one over here, which I accidentally named A. So we're going to name it teleport. And that is where we plan to teleport. We're going to grab the index ID, which is right here, this little string of numbers which we can copy right below the word teleport. And we're going to go back over to our Miliastra Sandbox, and we are going to make a new node. Oh, shoot. And we are going to make a new node, and we are going to search up preset point, which should come up with what we need. And we are going to get query preset point position rotation, which essentially just says we want the position and the rotation of this preset point, not just the location. You want the location and the rotation. So we want both of those things, and then we're going to put the point index, which is that number we just copied, into there, and that is going to teleport us when we use this tab. It's going to teleport us right to this position that we just made that preset point. Let's just quickly demonstrate that. So let's get our sign that we have, that we made that's going to teleport us. So I found the problem, it's because I added an inventory and I didn't add an inventory template. So if I just add a template to there, I think that should fix the problem. Unless I just need to, if not, I just need to get rid of that inventory thing because I don't actually need it right now. So let's test this out really quickly. Here we go. So here you can turn off the cosmetics display phase and the test play settlement, which are basically the things that slow you down and make it really annoying. So I typically like to turn those off. You can switch between mannequin and mannequina, or you can change whether you want to be player 1, player 2, whatever. All this stuff is really useful and all, but we're not here for any of this. The only thing you'd really want to do is turn these off or change your mannequin if you really want to. So we're just going to test play and see how this goes. So we are now in the game, and we can press teleport, and it brings us all the way over to here, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. So let's abandon challenge, because that's all we wanted to do. Test out and make sure it worked. But now that we are done with that, we might actually decide, maybe we want to add a variable that if it's not at that variable, it doesn't let us teleport. So maybe we have to have the integer variable. So maybe we want the variable we put on our character a little earlier, aka the score, to be, where did I put it actually? Maybe we want this score variable over here to equal 1 before we can teleport. So we'll have that score equal to 0 right now. And we will go and add that variable. Get custom variable. That's the node we added earlier. Now we can add the variable name, which we named it score. And we need to connect the target entity to the get player entity which the character belongs to on the affiliated player entity. Or I believe we could also connect it to this, but I'm not sure what the difference would be. I don't know. I normally just typically connect it to this, and that's how I do it. I'm not sure if there would be any small differences or anything. We're basically going to connect the affiliated player entity to the target entity, and that is going to get the score variable we have that's on the player entity over into this node graph. And now we can do this. We can do equals, which this is basically some math stuff. This is in the operation nodes. And we can grab an equal to thing. We can connect this to this, and then we want to say if this is equal to 1, it will work. We actually do need to add a double branch for this, never mind. So for this, we want to get rid of this, disconnect that link, connect to the, when tab is selected, it goes to the double branch, and then basically, so now we are going to take the double branch and say if that is equal to that, if this custom score variable is equal to 1, the condition is correct. It says it's equal to. If that's correct, if this score is equal to 1, the result, either yes or no, would go into the condition. And then it would say, if that's the correct, you would teleport the player. If not, let's see if there's a kill player and like node. Defeat all player characters. Okay, everyone dies if this is wrong. So let's try this out. Player entity. And let's go to connecting this. Let's go get player entity, which character belongs, and connect that. It's not looking very pretty, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. Let's try this out, see if it works. I might be wrong. And this might just not work. So let's test it out. This should kill our character because we have the score of 0. We're going to try it out again when our score is 1. But for now, we're just going to show that this works. So, teleport. And it kills us. So that is because our score right now is currently 0. And our score is not equal to 1. So if we quickly escape and abandon challenge, we're going to go over to our player variables. And we're going to change our score to 1. And now that that is 1, we can go back and we can test play it. Now that we are back in the game, we can teleport, and it will teleport us instead of killing us, which is absolutely wonderful that we're not dying. So, moving on, that is us making our first little mechanism in the game, and if you would like some more tutorials on this, please leave a like, and I'll do some more, and please consider leaving a comment down below saying maybe any problems you've been having, anything you'd like to learn about, because I would be happy to respond and make another video on these topics and go over what's been troubling you guys. So let me know. I'm still learning myself, if I'm being entirely honest. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye!